on the coldest Christmas Eve London had known in many years, when the River Thames lay dark and still like a ribbon of ink, a single light appeared in a window that should have been empty. It was not a bright light, not loud, not demanding, just a small, steady candle flame glowing inside the Royal Hospital, Chelsea. Most people would never notice it, but those who did never forgot it. Because that candle was never lit by accident. And before the night was over, it would awaken memories buried deeper than snow, mend hearts that time had quietly broken, and reveal a Christmas secret the Chelsea pensioners had carried with them, silently, faithfully, for more than 100 years. A secret that only appears when the world slows down enough to listen. And it all began with one old soldier who could not sleep. Arthur Bell lay awake beneath heavy blankets, listening to the quiet. Not empty quiet, living quiet. The kind filled with ticking clocks, distant footsteps, and the soft breathing of a building that had sheltered generations of men like him. At 93, sleep no longer came easily to Arthur. It drifted near him sometimes, brushing past like a familiar ghost, but tonight it refused to settle. Outside his tall window, snow fell slowly, each flake taking its time, as though it knew it was welcome. The courtyard of the Royal Hospital, Chelsea, was bathed in moonlight, the red, brick walls glowing softly beneath their white covering. Arthur turned his head toward the bedside table. There, beside his spectacles, rested a small wooden box, worn smooth by years of careful handling. He opened it with trembling fingers. Inside lay a photograph, a young man in uniform, a woman with bright eyes and a knitted scarf. A Christmas tree behind them, decorated with paper stars and hope. Emily. Arthur smiled, though his eyes stung. "This was always your favorite night," he whispered. This was the first Christmas Eve since she had gone. The room felt larger without her, quieter in a way that hurt. Arthur sighed and closed his eyes, hoping sleep might finally claim him. That was when he noticed it. A flicker of light. Not from his lamp, from across the courtyard. Arthur sat up slowly, his heart beginning to beat faster than it had in years. A candle burned in a window of the west wing. Arthur frowned. No one lived there anymore. He wrapped his red dressing gown around himself and rose carefully from the bed. His slippers whispered against the polished floor as he stepped into the corridor. The Royal Hospital at night was a place few ever saw. By day, it was filled with gentle laughter, visitors, and the quiet pride of the Chelsea pensioners in their scarlet coats. But by night, the halls belonged to memory. Portraits watched from the walls. Medals glinted softly in glass cases. The air smelled faintly of polish, pine, and old books. Arthur walked slowly, leaning on his cane. Each step echoed longer than it should have. The closer he came to the west wing, the warmer the air felt. Not warm like fire, but like comfort. Like standing too close to someone you love. The door stood slightly open. It should have been locked. Arthur hesitated, then pushed it gently. The hinges did not creak. Inside, the room glowed with candlelight. Not one candle, They lined the window sills, rested on tables, and flickered in lanterns that Arthur remembered from long ago. The room smelled of pine needles, beeswax, and something sweeter, mulled wine, perhaps, or memory itself. And then he heard it, singing, low, soft, and unmistakably human. Silent night, holy night. Arthur's breath caught in his throat. He knew that voice. Tom, he whispered. From the far side of the room, a man stepped forward, smiling gently. He wore an old uniform, the kind Arthur had not seen since the war. His hair was dark again, his eyes bright. Sergeant Thomas Wilkes, Arthur's closest friend. The man who had fallen in the snow on Christmas morning in 1944. You're late, Tom said warmly. Arthur's knees weakened. You're gone? Arthur said, though the words felt thin and unconvincing. Tom chuckled softly, only from the morning. More figures appeared, stepping out of the shadows like thoughts remembered too suddenly. Men of all ages, all wars, all histories. Some Arthur recognized instantly, others he knew only by the look in their eyes. Chelsea pensioners, fallen soldiers, brothers. We come every Christmas Eve, Tom said, gesturing around the room. We always have. Arthur swallowed hard. Why now? Tom looked at him with kindness. Because you needed us. The candles burned steadily, their flames unmoving despite the stillness of the air. Arthur felt tears spill freely down his cheeks, and for the first time in many months, he did not wipe them away. But Emily, he said quietly. She's gone. Tom nodded. So you think? The candlelight shifted, and there she was, standing near the window, young again, smiling the way she always had when she knew she was about to surprise him. She held a paper star in her hand. Arthur reached out, his fingers trembling. Emily. She stepped closer, and though she did not touch him, warmth flooded his chest. We never leave on Christmas Eve, she said softly. Not when love is still calling. Arthur sank into a chair, overwhelmed, while the room filled with gentle sound, soft laughter, murmured greetings, the clink of cups. A long table appeared, covered with simple food, bread, cheese, warm soup, steaming mugs of tea. A Christmas meal, just like the ones they used to share. This is what we protect, Tom said, sitting beside Arthur. Not the building, not the uniforms, but this. He gestured around the room, belonging. Outside, the clock in the courtyard began to chime. Midnight. As each bell rang, the room seemed to grow lighter, warmer, fuller. The men sang carols, their voices blending into something gentle and deep, like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. Emily sat beside Arthur, her presence as real as it had ever been. For a while, Arthur forgot his age, forgot his aches, forgot his grief. He remembered only warmth, but even magic must obey the morning. As the final chime faded, the candle flames flickered. The figures began to soften, their edges blurring like breath on cold glass. Tom stood and placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder. It's almost time, he said. Arthur's chest tightened. Will I see you again? Tom smiled. Every Christmas Eve, as long as someone remembers. Emily leaned close, her voice like a whisper of falling snow. Sleep now, my love. The room faded. The candles dimmed. The west wing returned to silence. Arthur found himself back in his bed, the first light of dawn creeping through the window. The candle across the courtyard was gone, but the warmth remained. Arthur closed his eyes, and this time sleep came easily. Outside, Christmas morning arrived quietly, carrying with it something gentle and unseen. In the hearts of the Chelsea pensioners, in the walls of the old hospital, and in the soft glow of memory, Christmas cheer spread, slowly, patiently, lovingly. Just as it always had, and just as it always would. Arthur awoke to the sound of bells. Not loud bells, not the kind that startled, but distant and gentle, as though they were ringing somewhere far away, carried on the slow breath of winter air. For a moment, he did not remember where he was. Then the familiar weight of the blankets, the soft creak of the bed, and the faint scent of pine brought him back. His room at the Royal Hospital, Chelsea. Christmas morning. Light filtered through the curtains, pale and silvery, resting quietly on the walls. The night felt far away now, like a dream that lingered just beyond reach. Yet something inside Arthur felt different. Lighter, warmer, as though a knot he had carried for years had finally loosened. He sat up slowly. On the bedside table, beside his spectacles, lay the wooden box. It was open. Arthur frowned. He was certain he had closed it the night before. Inside, the photograph of Emily had shifted slightly, as if someone had touched it. And beside it, where nothing had ever been before, lay a small paper star. Arthur's breath caught. He picked it up carefully. The edges were uneven, folded by hand. Emily's hands. A soft smile spread across his face, and he pressed the star gently to his chest. The night had not been a dream. The Royal Hospital, Chelsea, stirred awake slowly, the way it always did on Christmas Day. Doors opened softly. Footsteps echoed gently along the corridors. Voices greeted one another in hushed, cheerful tones, as though everyone had agreed, without saying so, to protect the peace left behind by the night. Arthur dressed carefully, fastening the buttons of his scarlet coat one by one. Each button carried its own memory, ceremonies, parades, quiet afternoons, shared jokes. When he stepped into the hall, he found others already there. Old friends, familiar faces. Some looked brighter than usual, eyes clearer, shoulders lighter. "Morning, Arthur," said George, tipping his head slightly. "Sleep well." Arthur hesitated. He saw something in George's expression, a softness, a knowing. "I did," Arthur replied gently. "Better than I have in a long time." But George smiled, but said nothing more. They walked together toward the dining hall, where the smell of warm bread and tea filled the air. The tables were set with care, white cloths pressed smooth, sprigs of holly placed at each setting. A simple Christmas feast. As Arthur sat, he noticed small things. A chair pulled back slightly, as if someone had just risen. An extra mug set near the end of the table. a faint warmth lingering where no one stood. No one commented, no one needed to. Later, as snow continued to fall outside, the pensioners gathered in the great hall. A tall Christmas tree stood near the fireplace, its branches heavy with ornaments. Some old, some new, all carrying stories. Arthur found himself drawn to one ornament in particular, a small wooden soldier, hand-carved, its paint worn thin. He reached out and touched it. "I made that," said a voice beside him. Arthur turned. Thomas Wilkes. Not as he had appeared in the night. No glowing light, no shimmer, but solid real, dressed like the others, though no one else seemed to notice him. Arthur's heart did not race this time. It simply opened. "You stayed," Arthur whispered. Tom nodded. "Just for today." They stood together, watching the fire crackle softly. "Do they know?" Arthur asked. Tom shook his head. "They don't need to. They feel it." Arthur watched as laughter rippled through the hall, as hands clapped shoulders, as stories began to flow. Tales of old Christmases, of pranks and parades, of letters from home. The sound wrapped around him like a blanket. "This is what it's for," Tom said quietly. "The night, the candle, all of it," Arthur nodded. He understood now. In the afternoon, the pensioners were allowed to wander the grounds. Arthur stepped outside, leaning on his cane, breathing in the crisp winter air. Snow covered the paths, but they had been carefully cleared, leaving neat lines through the white. Near the edge of the courtyard, he noticed something unusual. A bench, old wood, smooth and familiar. Arthur's steps slowed. He sat. The bench was warm. He laughed softly to himself, a sound full of wonder rather than fear. Around him, the hospital stood quiet and proud, its windows glowing with soft light. Somewhere, a carol drifted faintly through the air. Arthur closed his eyes. He thought of Emily, of Tom, of all the faces that had passed through these halls. He felt them, not as ghosts, not as memories, but as presence. Steady, kind, unending. The snow continued to fall, each flake settling gently, as if tucking the world in. And for the first time in many years, Arthur felt certain of something. No one was ever truly alone. Not on Christmas. Not ever. He sat there for a long while, breathing slowly, letting the quiet hold him. And somewhere deep within the walls of the Royal Hospital Chelsea, something ancient and loving listened, waiting patiently for nightfall once more. The Arthur awoke to the soft hum of the hospital waking slowly around him. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long golden lines across the red brick floors. Outside, the snow had settled into a perfect, untouched blanket, sparkling like powdered sugar. It was quiet, yet the quiet was alive, full of tiny sounds that only someone truly awake could hear. The gentle creak of the floorboards, the faint laughter of the kitchen staff preparing breakfast, the soft footsteps of pensioners moving through the corridors. Arthur wrapped his shawl around his shoulders and walked toward the common room. Today, there was a sense of anticipation in the air, subtle but unmistakable. It was as if the hospital itself was holding its breath, waiting for something that had always been there, but rarely revealed. As he entered the room, he noticed small touches he had never paid attention to before. Tiny stars carved into the edges of tables, handwritten notes tucked behind vases of holly, a tray of small gifts, scarves, knitted gloves, a jar of honey, set carefully by the fireplace. Each item seemed ordinary, yet carried a weight of thoughtfulness that made the room feel warmer than any fire could. George approached him with a quiet smile. "Arthur, you remember last Christmas?" he asked. "Do you remember how we tried to sneak gifts to those soldiers who weren't here anymore?" Arthur nodded slowly. Memories of past Christmases returned like a gentle tide. He remembered the cold nights in the barracks, the shared laughter over meager meals, the songs sung in soft, shaky voices. But more than that, he remembered the quiet acts of kindness, the small gestures no one recorded, no one praised, yet they meant everything to the men who received them. "They never left us," George said softly. "Even when we thought they were gone. They've always been here, in every small kindness, in every candle lit on a cold night." Arthur's eyes drifted to the window. Beyond, the snow continued to fall silently. He could almost see the faint outlines of figures moving through the white, like memories stepping carefully back into the world. The day unfolded slowly, gently. Meals were shared, stories told, and laughter rose softly, weaving around the walls of the hospital like a familiar song. Arthur noticed the way the younger volunteers moved among the pensioners, listening patiently, smiling kindly, learning to carry the spirit of Christmas with them. He realized that the joy was not in the gifts or decorations, but in the presence, in the shared attention, in the quiet acknowledgement of life's small miracles. In the afternoon, the pensioners gathered in the courtyard. The snow reflected the pale sunlight, and the crisp air carried the faint scent of pine and smoke from nearby chimneys. Arthur watched as Tom, still young in memory though invisible to the others, moved among the men, offering a comforting word here, a playful nudge there. Each gesture seemed to ripple outward, touching more than just those immediately near him. Arthur sat on a bench beneath a snow-laden tree, watching the delicate fall of flakes. The world felt suspended, as if time itself had slowed to let them breathe, to let them remember. He thought of Emily and the long years that had passed, of letters written but never sent, of moments that had slipped quietly into memory. And he understood that none of it had been lost. Every laugh, every sigh, every shared cup of tea. Everything had been saved here, in this place, in these walls, in the hearts of the men who remembered. By evening, the hospital halls were filled with a soft golden glow. Candles flickered in every window, and the smell of mulled wine and baked goods mingled with the crisp winter air. Arthur walked slowly from room to room, greeting his friends, sharing quiet words of gratitude, listening to their stories. Each tale, each memory, added another layer to the warmth that filled the space. As night began to fall, the first stars appeared in the sky, winking gently over the rooftops of London. Arthur returned to his room, carrying with him a small wooden ornament he had found earlier in the day. A simple hand-carved soldier. He placed it carefully on the bedside table beside the photograph of Emily and the paper star. Sitting back in his chair, Arthur closed his eyes and breathed slowly. The room felt alive with presence, yet serene. He could almost hear the soft echoes of laughter and song from the day, feel the warmth of remembered hands and voices. And in that quiet moment, he knew that Christmas cheer was not something fleeting or fragile. It was steady, enduring, and quietly unstoppable. It lived in memories, in gestures, in hearts that still remembered how to care. Arthur drifted into sleep that night, wrapped in the comforting embrace of those who had gone before and those who remained. The candle across the courtyard flickered once more, as if acknowledging his presence, and then glowed steadily through the night. For the Chelsea pensioners, and for Arthur, Christmas was no longer just a day. It was a feeling, a memory, a quiet miracle that could be shared again and again, as long as anyone remembered to look, to listen, and to care. The night was deep, the snow still fell, and the spirit of Christmas lived quietly, perfectly, in the hearts of those who had learned to notice it. Arthur woke to a silence that felt different from any other morning. The world outside the Royal Hospital, Chelsea, was blanketed in fresh snow, soft and thick, but the quiet carried a sense of expectation, as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something gentle, yet important, to unfold. He dressed slowly, careful not to disturb the peace that hung like a soft veil in the air. Every movement, every sound, seemed magnified in the stillness. He made his way down the corridor, noticing how the sunlight slanted through the tall windows, catching dust motes that floated like tiny stars. The walls felt warmer, almost alive, humming with the echoes of memory and laughter from the past days. In the courtyard, he saw the pensioners gathering quietly, some leaning on canes, others steady and upright, all moving with a grace that came from years of shared experience. Today, they would spread Christmas cheer beyond the hospital walls, carrying warmth and kindness to those who might otherwise be forgotten. Arthur joined them, walking slowly alongside George. "Where are we going first?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. "To the streets," George said, smiling gently. "To the people who need a bit of light. You'll see, it's what we've always done." Quietly, over all these years, the pensioners moved like a gentle procession. Each step they took seemed to leave a soft glow in the snow. Not magical, perhaps, but something just as powerful, a warmth that touched hearts. They carried small baskets filled with bread, wrapped treats, and handwritten notes, little gestures of care they would deliver to neighbors, passers-by, and those who were alone. Arthur followed quietly, noticing the reactions of the people they encountered. A woman tending to her front garden paused, surprised by the warm loaf of bread and the gentle greeting. A child, cheeks red from the cold, received a small ornament and a wink that made his eyes sparkle. Even the town's elderly residents, peering from behind lace curtains, smiled as though the weight of loneliness had been lifted. If only for a moment, Arthur felt a lightness in his chest he had not experienced in years. He realized the magic of the hospital was not confined to walls or uniforms. It flowed through every act of kindness, through every shared memory, through the simple act of noticing and caring. As the afternoon deepened into a soft, golden evening, the pensioners returned to the hospital, the baskets now empty, but their hearts full. Inside, the halls glowed with candlelight, casting a gentle radiance on worn floors and familiar faces. Arthur moved from room to room, helping tidy, listening to quiet conversations, and sharing stories of Christmases long past. He paused by the large Christmas tree in the main hall. Its ornaments glimmered faintly in the candlelight, reflecting memories of soldiers long gone, of friends remembered, of love that endured beyond years. Arthur reached out and touched one of the paper stars that Emily had once held. It felt warm, alive with memory and care. The sun dipped low, painting the snow outside with soft pinks and purples. Arthur sat near the fireplace, the flicker of flames mirrored in his eyes. Around him, the pensioners gathered in comfortable silence, some dozing, some quietly reminiscing, all enveloped in a gentle, shared peace. Arthur realized that this was the true gift of Christmas. Not the presents, not the decorations, not the feasts, but the feeling of connection, of warmth, of remembering and being remembered. The candle across the courtyard still burned steadily, as if echoing the quiet joy that now filled every corner of the hospital. As night fell, Arthur leaned back, letting the day's calm settle into him. The snow outside was untouched, pure and serene, reflecting the soft glow of the hospital lights. The spirit of Christmas had spread quietly through the streets and into hearts, carried by those who remembered the value of small acts of kindness. Arthur closed his eyes, letting the warmth of the day and the memories of those who had come before lull him towards sleep. The Chelsea pensioners, and all those whose hearts had been touched, rested peacefully that night, knowing that Christmas cheer was not fleeting. It was eternal, living in every gentle gesture, every remembered kindness, every quiet act of love. And in the stillness, the Royal Hospital Chelsea itself seemed to breathe a sigh of contentment, settling in for the night, holding its stories and its people close. Until the next Christmas, when the quiet magic would rise again. Arthur awoke to a hush that felt deeper than any he had known before. The hospital was quiet, yet it was not empty. The walls, the floors, even the air seemed full of the gentle presence of those who had walked these halls for generations. The snow outside glistened under the first light of dawn, untouched and perfect, as if the world had been carefully folded and tucked in for a long, peaceful rest. He rose slowly, feeling the comforting weight of the blanket around his shoulders. The wooden box sat on the bedside table, the paper star and photograph of Emily still resting there, as though waiting for him to notice them again. Arthur reached out, holding the star in his hands, and felt warmth flow through his fingers. A quiet reminder that some things never fade. Walking through the hallways, Arthur noticed the little details that made the hospital feel alive. A hand-carved ornament balanced on a windowsill. A small wreath hung carefully on a door. The faint smell of pine mingling with the scent of wood polish and tea. Each detail carried the echoes of memories, the footprints of lives well lived, and the invisible threads of care that tied every pensioner together. The day began slowly. Breakfast was shared with gentle conversation, laughter drifting softly through the rooms like music. Arthur listened to stories from old friends, tales of Christmases past, of quiet heroism, of small, unnoticed kindnesses. He realized that the magic of this place was not in grand gestures or decorations, but in the simple act of remembering and giving, over and over again. Later, the pensioners gathered once more in the courtyard. Snow crunched softly beneath their feet as they moved together, carrying blankets, treats, and gifts for those in need. Arthur followed, observing the smiles that bloomed on faces as simple gestures of warmth and attention reached them. He understood then that the spirit of Christmas was not just in being remembered, but in remembering others, in reaching out, and in sharing a piece of one's heart without expecting anything in return. As the afternoon light softened, Arthur returned inside, feeling a quiet joy that had settled into his bones. The main hall glowed with candlelight, the tree shimmering gently, ornaments catching the light like little fragments of time. He placed the paper star back on the table beside Emily's photograph and took a deep, steadying breath. For a long moment, he simply sat there, letting the warmth of memory, love, and quiet accomplishment fill him completely. The sun dipped low, and the hospital halls were bathed in a golden, fading light. Arthur found a chair by the window and gazed out at the courtyard, now sparkling under the evening sky. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the faint sound of bells, carried softly through the crisp air. They were gentle, steady, and full of promise, a reminder that magic and kindness never truly left. They were only waiting to be noticed. As night settled fully over Chelsea, Arthur leaned back, closing his eyes. The candle across the courtyard flickered once more, steady and unwavering, as if nodding in approval. The pensioners, wrapped in warmth and memories, drifted towards sleep in their rooms, their hearts full, their minds at peace. Arthur felt Emily's presence beside him, not as a ghost, not as a dream, but as a quiet, enduring comfort. He realized then that Christmas was more than a day. It was a feeling, a rhythm, a gentle heartbeat shared between those who loved and those who were loved. The night deepened. Snow continued to fall softly, covering the streets in white. The Royal Hospital Chelsea stood steadfast, holding stories, memories, and hearts close. its walls alive with warmth. And in that perfect stillness, Arthur drifted into the deepest sleep he had known in years, wrapped in the quiet magic of Christmas, knowing that cheer, kindness, and love would continue to flow here, inside these walls, and into the hearts of all who had been touched. For the Chelsea pensioners, for Arthur, and for anyone who remembered the gentle power of care, Christmas was eternal. And so, under the soft glow of candlelight, the hospital, the pensioners, and the sleeping city shared one quiet, unbroken, perfect Christmas night. Arthur woke to a quiet so deep it seemed almost alive. The Royal Hospital, Chelsea, lay under a thick blanket of snow, each flake resting perfectly on the ground, on rooftops, and on the branches of the trees. The air smelled faintly of pine, polished wood, and the faint warmth of yesterday's fires. Each breath Arthur took felt crisp, yet comforting, filling his chest with a soft, gentle warmth. He rose slowly, feeling the familiar weight of his blankets fall away. On the bedside table, the wooden box still waited. The paper star and photograph of Emily rested inside, unchanged, yet somehow carrying a faint shimmer of life. Arthur picked up the star, pressing it gently to his chest. Its edges were delicate, folded perfectly by hands that had long been gone, and yet holding a warmth he could still feel. He dressed slowly, the scarlet coat of the pensioners fitting snugly around his shoulders, and made his way down the quiet hallways. The corridors were bathed in the soft glow of morning light, catching dust particles that floated lazily in the air like tiny, drifting stars. Each painting on the wall seemed to watch him. Portraits of men and women who had lived, loved, and fought, their eyes gentle, but full of stories that lingered in the air. In the main hall, some pensioners had already gathered. George approached him with a quiet, knowing smile. "Arthur," he said softly, "today is special. You'll see why." Arthur nodded, curiosity mingling with calm. "Where are we going?" George gestured gently toward the courtyard. "Out there, to the streets, to the people who need a little light. We've done this for decades, quietly. You'll understand soon." Outside, the courtyard glowed with snow, reflecting the pale sunlight. Each step Arthur took made a soft crunch in the snow. The pensioners carried baskets filled with bread, small gifts, ornaments, and handwritten notes. Small gestures meant to touch hearts quietly. As they moved through the streets, Arthur noticed how every small action created ripples. A woman tending her garden paused, her eyes lighting up at the sight of warm bread offered with a soft smile. Children stopped mid-play, enchanted by a simple ornament handed to them with a wink. Even those who usually sat quietly behind lace curtains peeked out, their faces softening as if remembering something long forgotten. Arthur felt a lightness he had not known in years. He realized the magic was not in the gifts themselves, but in the care, the attention, the thoughtfulness behind them. Each gesture, however small, carried warmth and kindness that radiated farther than he could see. As the day unfolded, they returned to the hospital. Inside, The warmth of the halls wrapped around everyone. Candlelight flickered softly across the floors. Ornaments on the tree shimmered faintly, and the smell of pine, baked goods, and warm drinks made every room feel like home. Arthur moved from room to room, listening to stories of past Christmases. He heard tales of soldiers' quiet heroism, of letters never sent, of acts of kindness given and received without expectation. Each story deepened the sense of connection, as if the walls themselves remembered every shared moment. By afternoon, the pensioners gathered again in the courtyard. The snow sparkled under the soft light, and the crisp air carried the faint melody of carols from the nearby streets. Arthur observed the subtle joys of small exchanges, a scarf draped around a shivering child's shoulders, a warm cup of tea handed to an elderly neighbor, and soft laughter that spread like a gentle breeze. Arthur realized that Christmas cheer was not fleeting. It was living in these tiny moments, in every smile, every remembered kindness, every gesture that showed someone they were seen. As evening settled, the hospital glowed with a soft golden light. Arthur returned to his room, placing the paper star and Emily's photograph on the bedside table. He sank into his chair, eyes closing slowly, listening to the gentle hum of life around him. The candle across the courtyard flickered steadily, as if affirming the warmth that now filled the building. He reflected on the day, the quiet joy, the gentle presence of friends, the comfort of memory, the small acts of love that had moved through the halls and into the hearts of those who had been touched. This, he realized, was the true gift of Christmas. Night deepened. Snow continued to fall, softly covering the world outside. The hospital, its walls full of stories and warmth, seemed to exhale a sigh of contentment. Arthur drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep, wrapped in the comfort of shared memories, gentle acts of kindness, and the quiet, enduring magic of Christmas. In that serene silence, Chelsea pensioners and Arthur knew that Christmas was not just a single day. It was a feeling, a rhythm, a heartbeat of love and care that would continue quietly, patiently, eternally. As night fell over Chelsea, Arthur stayed by the window a little longer, watching the soft blanket of snow cover the streets. The world seemed hushed, as if the city itself were listening. Each snowflake drifted silently, landing in perfect rhythm, whispering stories of Christmases past that had passed through generations. Arthur let himself sink into the memories, letting them flow freely, like a gentle stream carrying warmth through a cold night. He remembered Christmases from decades ago, when he was younger, a soldier far from home. Nights spent in barracks, surrounded by the quiet camaraderie of men who shared both hardship and humor. Laughter echoing softly in candle-lit halls. The bitter cold of winter couldn't touch them, because together they carried warmth in their hearts. Letters from home arrived slowly, but every word felt like a gift, a lifeline in the quiet dark. He could almost hear Emily's voice then, soft and laughing, carrying over the frozen streets of London. Her scarf, bright and knitted by her own hands, had always smelled faintly of pine and sugar, a scent he could never forget. The memory made him smile, a warm ache blooming in his chest, comforting yet bittersweet. The present mingled with the past as Arthur finally rose and made his way to the dining hall, where the pensioners were gathered. The aroma of fresh bread, roasted vegetables, and spiced tea greeted him, carrying him deeper into the cozy embrace of the hospital. Gentle chatter filled the room, voices carrying warmth and nostalgia. He noticed small, careful gestures, one pensioner helping another with a scarf, someone quietly placing a hand on a friend's shoulder, smiles exchanged in quiet understanding. After breakfast, the group prepared for another round of Christmas visits. The streets outside the hospital glimmered under the winter sun, snow sparkling like tiny diamonds scattered across rooftops and hedges. Arthur followed the pensioners as they walked slowly through the town, carrying baskets of treats, ornaments, and small handwritten notes. Each encounter was a small story. A child opened the basket to find a tiny, hand-carved wooden soldier. The boy's eyes widened, and a shy smile broke across his face. Arthur's heart lifted as he handed a knitted scarf to an elderly woman sitting alone on a bench, her hands trembling as she accepted it. "Merry Christmas," he whispered softly. The woman's eyes glistened, and she nodded, her smile quiet but profound, as if this simple act reminded her that she was seen, remembered, and cherished. Arthur paused, taking a deep breath. The cold air filled his lungs, but he felt no chill, only warmth. A warmth that radiated from the hearts of the pensioners, from the people they were touching, from the quiet magic of the season itself. As they returned to the hospital, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden glow across the snow. The warmth inside seemed to amplify, reflecting off polished floors, candlelight, and red coats, creating an atmosphere that was both alive and soothing. Arthur wandered slowly through the halls, greeting friends and listening to stories of past Christmases. Tales of faraway lands, shared laughter in barracks, small kindnesses that had become legends among the pensioners. He paused by the large Christmas tree, noticing ornaments that carried history within them. A hand-carved soldier, a faded star, a small bell, all reminders of memories preserved in time. Arthur gently touched one of the paper stars, feeling the texture of Emily's hands in its folds. He remembered nights when they had decorated trees together, when laughter and love had filled every corner of their home. Evening settled slowly, the halls glowing warmly as candlelight danced on walls and ornaments. The pensioners gathered quietly in the main hall, some sitting near the fireplace, others standing in small groups, sharing quiet stories, smiles, and laughter. Arthur sat by the window, looking out at the snow-covered courtyard, feeling a deep, steady peace. He realized that the true magic of Christmas was not in presents, decorations, or feasts. It was in these quiet moments, in the acts of remembering, in kindness freely given, in love that endured across years and memory. And then, as night fully enveloped Chelsea, Arthur closed his eyes. The candle across the courtyard flickered softly, steady and unwavering, as if holding watch over the hospital and all its stories. Snow continued to fall gently outside, and inside, hearts were full, minds at peace, and the spirit of Christmas rested deeply, quietly, eternally. Arthur drifted into sleep, wrapped in the warmth of memories, shared laughter, gentle acts of love, and the timeless magic of Christmas. The Royal Hospital Chelsea held its stories close, every wall, every corner, every floorboard whispering the same truth, that kindness, love, and cheer could never truly fade. They lived on quietly, patiently, in every heart that remembered. The snow had settled into thick layers, softening every sound. Outside, the streets of Chelsea were quiet, yet alive with the faint traces of movement footprints. The gentle shuffle of passers-by, the distant bark of a dog, and the occasional whisper of wind. Through bare branches, Arthur wrapped his scarf tightly around his neck and stepped outside with a small group of pensioners. Their baskets, filled with treats, ornaments, and little handwritten notes, swayed gently as they walked. Each step through the town felt deliberate, unhurried, like the world had slowed just for them. Arthur noticed the subtle reactions of the people they passed. A shopkeeper paused from arranging displays to smile at the small gestures offered. Children, their cheeks pink from the cold, held out eager hands to receive tiny ornaments or candies. Even those who were usually distant or quiet responded with soft gratitude, their eyes brightening, their lips curling into gentle smiles. Arthur carried a small loaf of bread, wrapped in brown paper. He approached an elderly man, sitting alone on a bench. The man's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the gift. "Merry Christmas," Arthur said softly. The man's eyes glistened. "Thank you," he whispered. "I didn't expect anyone to remember." Arthur felt warmth spread through him, a quiet glow that seemed to reach his very chest. He understood then that Christmas was not about grand gestures. It was about being seen, being remembered, and offering a moment of connection to someone who might feel alone. As they walked through the snowy streets, Arthur's mind wandered to memories of Christmases long past. He remembered the cold barracks, the laughter shared in the dim light of a candle, the smell of wood smoke from a distant fire, and letters from home arriving slowly, but carrying immense comfort. He thought of Emily's gentle smile, her scarf around her neck, her laughter that could melt any frost. These memories were no longer just recollections. They were alive, mingling with the present, guiding his steps, warming his heart. The pensioners moved from street to street, leaving small gifts and sharing gentle words. Every interaction, no matter how small, seemed to ripple outward. Arthur noticed a little girl sitting alone on a doorstep. He knelt down and handed her a paper star, carefully folded. Her eyes widened, and she clutched it close to her chest, whispering a small, "Thank you," that reached directly into his heart. Returning to the hospital, the group felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The courtyard glowed under the pale evening light, and the snow reflected every glimmer of candlelight from the windows. Inside, warmth greeted them. The smell of mulled wine and baked goods filled the hallways, inviting them into the cozy embrace of familiar rooms. Arthur wandered slowly through the corridors, noticing small, comforting details he had overlooked before. A hand-carved ornament tucked into a vase, a wreath hanging perfectly on a door, the soft hum of conversation blending with the crackle of fires. He realized that every corner, every gesture, every memory contributed to the magic of the hospital. It was a living, breathing place, filled with stories, laughter, and the quiet pulse of care that had endured for decades. As the evening deepened, the pensioners gathered in the main hall. Some sat near the fireplace, watching the flames dance gently, while others shared quiet stories, each tale carrying echoes of the past. Arthur joined them, placing the paper star next to Emily's photograph on the table. He closed his eyes briefly, allowing the gentle warmth of memories to wash over him. The candle across the courtyard flickered steadily, its light soft but unwavering. Outside, snow continued to fall, drifting silently onto rooftops and windowsills. Inside, the pensioners rested, hearts full, minds at peace, and the quiet magic of Christmas wrapped around everyone like a soft blanket. Arthur felt Emily's presence once more, not as a ghost, not as a fleeting memory, but as a comforting warmth that settled beside him. He realized that Christmas was more than a single day. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat, a quiet thread of love and care that continued as long as someone remembered to see it, to feel it, and to share it. And so, as night deepened and snow continued to fall, Arthur drifted into a long, deep sleep. The Royal Hospital, Chelsea, held its stories close. Every wall, every corner, every floorboard, whispering the same truth: that kindness, love, and cheer never fade. They live on quietly, patiently, eternally, in the hearts of those who remember. The fire in the main hall burned low and steady, its soft crackle blending with the gentle hush of evening. Arthur sat in his chair, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, watching the steam rise and fade into the air. The scent of cinnamon and cloves drifted through the room, comforting and familiar, stirring memories he hadn't visited in years. He thought of his childhood Christmases, long before uniforms and duty shaped his days. Snow would gather along the narrow streets where he grew up, piling softly against doorsteps and windowsills. His mother would wake early, humming quietly as she stirred porridge on the stove, the warmth of the kitchen filling the small house. His father would bring in a small pine branch from outside, shaking snow from it before placing it carefully in a tin by the hearth. It was never a grand tree, but it was always enough. Arthur remembered sitting on the floor as a boy, carefully folding paper decorations with clumsy fingers. Stars, chains, and little shapes cut unevenly, yet hung proudly where everyone could see them. The room would glow with candlelight, and laughter would echo softly against the walls. Those moments had felt endless then, as if Christmas would always arrive exactly the same way, year after year. The memory faded gently as someone nearby cleared their throat. George had begun telling a story, his voice low and steady. He spoke of a Christmas spent far from home during the war, when the cold had been sharp enough to sting through layers of clothing. They had gathered in a drafty shelter, sharing a single kettle of tea, passing it carefully from hand to hand. Someone had found a harmonica, dented and old, and played a slow tune that carried through the night. For a little while, the war seemed to pause, allowing warmth and humanity to exist between moments of hardship. Others joined in, each pensioner offering a memory, like a carefully wrapped gift. Tom spoke of a Christmas Eve patrol, where snow had fallen so heavily it muffled every sound, creating a strange, peaceful silence. Another remembered receiving a letter from home that arrived late, but felt perfectly timed. The words inside offering comfort that no blanket ever could. They spoke not with sadness, but with gratitude, their voices soft and reflective, like embers glowing long after a fire has burned. Arthur listened, his eyes half closed, letting the stories wash over him. These memories were not heavy, they were warm, like layers of wool settling gently around the heart. Later, someone brought out a small box of decorations. The pensioners moved slowly, carefully, placing ornaments on the tree, as if each one held meaning beyond its shape. Arthur held a simple wooden bell, its surface smooth from years of handling. He hung it gently on a lower branch, stepping back to admire the way it caught the light. Nearby, two pensioners carefully adjusted a strand of lights, their glow soft and golden. The tree shimmered quietly, not dazzling, but comforting, as if it belonged exactly where it stood. Tea was poured again, cups clinking softly. Biscuits were shared, broken carefully in half. Crumbs brushed away with quiet smiles. The room felt wrapped in warmth, not just from the fire, but from the shared presence of people who understood one another, without needing many words. Someone began to hum, almost without realizing it. A familiar carol, slow and gentle, drifted into the air. Others joined in quietly, voices low and unhurried. The song didn't demand attention. It simply existed, filling the space between breaths, settling into the corners of the room. Arthur felt something soften inside him. He thought of Emily again, not with ache this time, but with calm affection. He remembered how she used to sing while decorating, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the song was meant only for the room itself. She would pause to smile at him, eyes bright, hands dusted with flour or glitter, depending on the task. He had never told her how deeply those moments had stayed with him. But perhaps he didn't need to. Perhaps they lived on in the way he remembered, in the way he carried her kindness forward. As the carol faded, silence returned, comfortable and deep. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and steady, covering the world in quiet. Inside, the pensioners remained where they were, wrapped in blankets, memories, and the gentle glow of shared warmth. Arthur leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the day settle pleasantly over him. His breathing slowed. The fire crackled once more, then softened. The tree lights flickered gently, casting slow, moving shadows across the walls. In that peaceful moment, surrounded by stories, warmth, and quiet companionship, Arthur felt completely at rest. Christmas was no longer something he was remembering. It was something he was living, softly and fully, right there in the gentle hush of the night. And as the voices faded, the tea cooled, and the fire settled into glowing embers, sleep began to take him slowly, kindly, like a familiar friend returning at just the right time. The hall grew quieter as the evening stretched on, not abruptly, but in soft layers, like blankets being placed one after another. The fire no longer crackled loudly. Instead, it murmured, a low, comforting sound that blended with the rhythm of breathing and the occasional creak of old wooden beams. Settling for the night, Arthur remained in his chair, eyes half closed, teacup now resting untouched in his hands, its warmth slowly fading, but never entirely gone. Time felt different now, slower, wider, as though the night itself had decided there was nowhere it needed to be. Across the room, one of the pensioners adjusted a blanket over his knees. Another leaned back, eyes closed, listening not to anything in particular, but to everything at once. The fire, the distant wind, the soft ticking of a clock that had marked countless hours before this one. The Royal Hospital, Chelsea, seemed to breathe gently, holding everyone inside it with quiet care. Arthur's thoughts drifted again, this time not pulled sharply by memory, but carried slowly, like leaves floating downstream. He remembered a Christmas during the war, when the snow had been relentless. It had fallen for days, transforming harsh landscapes into something almost gentle. The men had stood together, stamping their boots to keep warm, joking quietly, sharing stories they pretended not to miss too much. Someone had produced a small tin of biscuits, crushed and broken, but passed around with reverence, as if they were treasures. That night, Arthur had stood watch under a sky, so clear it felt endless. Stars stretched above him, cold and brilliant. He had felt small then, but not alone. There was comfort in knowing others were nearby, standing watch too, sharing the same cold, the same silence. Even now, decades later, that memory carried a strange peace. A log shifted in the fireplace, glowing briefly brighter before settling again. Arthur opened his eyes and noticed how the light danced gently across the faces around him. These men, these friends, carried entire lifetimes within them. Each wrinkle, each quiet smile, each slow movement held years of love, loss, resilience, and kindness. Someone poured more tea. The soft sound of liquid meeting porcelain seemed unusually loud in the hush, yet no one minded. The pensioner who poured it did so carefully, as if aware that even small movements mattered in moments like this. Arthur accepted the cup when it was offered, nodding in thanks. He didn't drink right away. He simply held it, letting the warmth seep into his palms. The tree lights blinked softly, not in any pattern, but in a way that felt alive, Shadows shifted lazily on the walls. Outside, the wind brushed gently against the windows, carrying snowflakes that tapped faintly before sliding away. Another memory surfaced, this one quieter. Emily, late at night, long after guests had gone. The house would be still, decorations glowing softly, plates stacked neatly, crumbs brushed away. She would sit beside him on the sofa, feet tucked beneath her, resting her head against his shoulder. They wouldn't speak much then. They didn't need to. The comfort of being together was enough. Arthur felt that same comfort now. The pensioners began drifting off one by one, not standing up abruptly, but surrendering gently to rest. Some remained in their chairs, heads tilted, breaths slow and deep. Others rose carefully and made their way down quiet corridors, slippers whispering against polished floors. Arthur stayed where he was, watching the fire, listening to the building settle into its nighttime rhythm. He felt no urgency to move. Sleep would come when it was ready. Eventually, he stood, joints stiff but familiar, and made his way down the hall. The corridors were dimly lit, lamps casting warm pools of light on the floor. Paintings watched silently as he passed. Faces from history, all once living, breathing, loving, just as he was now. He paused by a window. The courtyard lay still beneath its blanket of snow. Footprints from earlier had softened, nearly erased. The candle across the way still burned, its flame unwavering, protected from the wind. Arthur smiled faintly. That candle had been there, for as long as he could remember, a quiet promise that warmth remained even in the coldest hours. Back in his room, Arthur moved slowly, deliberately. He placed Emily's photograph and the paper star carefully on the table, just as he always did. He folded his coat, smoothed the fabric, and set it aside. These small rituals mattered. They gave shape to the night. He lay down, blankets pulled up comfortably, not too tight, not too loose. The bed creaked softly beneath him, a familiar sound. As he settled, he felt the day's weight lift, replaced by something lighter, something kinder. His breathing slowed. Thoughts drifted in and out, ungrasped, unjudged. Images passed gently. Snow falling, candlelight flickering, laughter echoing faintly, voices singing softly without words. The hospital rested with him. Outside, Chelsea slept. Streets were quiet. Windows glowed dimly, then darkened one by one. Somewhere, a clock chimed softly, marking the hour, though it felt unimportant now. Time no longer pressed forward. It simply existed. Arthur slipped into sleep, deep and untroubled. Hours passed unnoticed. When he stirred again, it was not from noise, but from a subtle shift. A sense of early morning approaching. Not dawn yet, but the promise of it. The kind of moment when the world holds its breath before waking. He remained still, savoring the warmth. Memories returned, softer now. Christmas mornings long ago. The hush before excitement. The smell of tea brewing, bread warming, snow melting slowly from boots by the door. The feeling that something gentle awaited. Footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. Someone else awake, moving carefully, respecting the quiet. The building responded with small creaks, as if acknowledging the movement. Arthur smiled to himself. He did not rise yet. There was no need. The moment was perfect as it was. When he finally did sit up, the light in the room had changed. Pale and silvery, it filtered through the window, touching the edges of furniture, catching on the paper star. Snow still fell outside, lighter now, drifting rather than settling. Arthur dressed slowly, savoring the calm. Each movement felt deliberate, grounded. Down the hall, the scent of fresh tea and bread greeted him. Morning had begun, not loudly, but kindly. The pensioners gathered again, quieter than the night before, voices low, smiles gentle. There was no rush, no agenda beyond simply being together. Arthur poured himself tea and stood by the window once more. Christmas was still there. Not just in decorations or songs, but in the way the light touched the snow, in the shared silence, in the warmth passed from hand to hand without words. He realized then that this feeling, the coziness, the peace, the quiet joy, was not something that ended when the season passed. It lingered. It stayed. It lived in memory and kindness, ready to be felt again whenever someone slowed down enough to notice. And as the day unfolded gently, Arthur carried that knowledge with him, steady and comforting, like a flame that never truly goes out. The Royal Hospital Chelsea continued its quiet rhythm, holding stories old and new, wrapping each moment in warmth, allowing rest, memory, and peace to flow freely, unbroken, unhurried, and endlessly kind. The morning unfolded without urgency. Light filtered slowly through the tall windows of the Royal Hospital Chelsea, pale and quiet, touching the edges of furniture and warming the red coats hanging neatly by the walls. Snow still lingered outside, but it no longer fell with the same insistence. Instead, it rested, settled into place, as if the world had decided to remain still just a little longer. Arthur moved through the day with an unspoken ease. He spoke when needed, smiled when smiles came naturally, and allowed silence to fill the spaces in between. There was comfort in not needing to explain anything, in being among those who understood the value of quiet companionship. Later, after a simple meal shared slowly, the pensioners gathered again, not because it was planned, but because it felt right. Chairs were drawn closer. Blankets were adjusted. Someone set a kettle to warm, though no one was particularly thirsty. These gestures had become rituals, and rituals had a way of anchoring the heart. Arthur listened as another memory surfaced among them. A Christmas from decades earlier, when someone had been too far from home to feel the season properly. The story was told softly, without drama, without sorrow. It ended not with loss, but with gratitude. Gratitude for surviving, gratitude for friendship, gratitude for small mercies that had mattered more than grand celebrations. Arthur felt something settle gently inside him. As afternoon faded into evening once more, the hospital grew quieter again. Lamps were lit, curtains drawn. Outside, the sky deepened into shades of blue and grey, the kind that invited reflection rather than thought. Arthur returned to the window one last time that night. The courtyard looked unchanged, peaceful and undisturbed. The candle still burned, unwavering. He wondered how many nights it had watched over this place, how many hearts it had quietly comforted, without ever asking for attention. Back in his room, Arthur prepared for rest as he always did, though tonight felt different. Not heavier, not lighter, but complete. He placed the paper star and Emily's photograph carefully in their familiar place. He paused, fingers resting on the edge of the table, and allowed himself one final memory. Emily, standing by the window on a winter night much like this one. Snow falling, lights glowing, her voice soft as she spoke about nothing important at all. Just observations, just thoughts, just presence. He remembered how safe those moments had felt, how full. That feeling had returned. Arthur lay down, pulling the blankets around him. The bed welcomed him like an old friend. His breathing slowed naturally, without effort. Thoughts came, but they no longer demanded attention. They passed like clouds drifting across a quiet sky. The Royal Hospital Chelsea settled into night once more. Pipes whispered softly. Floorboards creaked gently. Somewhere, a clock marked the passing of time, though it seemed unnecessary now. Outside, the world rested under snow and stars. Arthur drifted deeper into sleep, and as he did, the story continued. Not in words, but in feeling. Christmas did not end. It never truly had. It lived in every gentle act, every remembered kindness, every shared silence. It lived in the pensioners' quiet laughter, in cups of tea held for warmth rather than thirst, in the way stories were passed down without needing to be preserved. It lived in Arthur. Morning came again, eventually, though it felt far away. When Arthur opened his eyes, the room was filled with soft light, warm and reassuring. He felt rested in a way that went beyond sleep. He felt settled. He rose, dressed, and stepped into the hallway, where familiar faces greeted him with nods and gentle smiles. No one needed to say anything. Everything important had already been shared. As the day unfolded, life continued in its quiet rhythm. Snow melted slowly. Footprints appeared again in the courtyard. The candle was replaced, its purpose fulfilled for now. Decorations remained, not because they were required, but because they still felt welcome. Arthur moved through it all with calm certainty. He understood now that the coziest Christmas was not defined by a single night or a single memory. It was something carried forward, something shared quietly, something that asked only to be noticed. And so, as the Royal Hospital Chelsea continued to stand, solid, warm, and full of stories, Arthur carried on too, wrapped in peace, surrounded by gentle companionship, his heart light, his memories kind. The night would come again, as it always did. And when it did, it would find this place ready. Fires glowing, stories waiting. Kindness resting patiently in every corner. And in that knowing, in that gentle certainty, Arthur smiled softly, breathed deeply, and let the calm of the moment settle completely around him, safe, warm, at rest.